Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making Nashville Hot Chicken. To start this dish, we're going to make some bread and butter pickles because every good hot chicken is served with this as a condiment. So I have 2 cucumbers that I'm just slicing into rounds, about 1/4 of an inch thick. We need about 5½ cups of cucumber. So I put this in a little bowl. I'm sprinkling on 1½ tablespoons of kosher salt, mixing this around. I'm going to cover this and let this sit in the fridge for ½ of an hour just to soften these cucumbers. Now onto our brine. In a measuring cup, I've mixed 1 cup of white vinegar and ½ of a cup of apple cider vinegar, just pouring that in. Adding in 1 cup of white sugar and ½ of a cup of brown sugar. And yes, that's a lot of sugar, but bread and butter pickles are sweet, so we need that much sugar. Next in goes ½ of a teaspoon of celery seeds, 1/8 of a teaspoon of turmeric, and 1½ teaspoons of mustard seeds, which I didn't have, so I'm substituting with whole grain mustard. We're going to bring this to a simmer over the stove and let it cook just until all those flavors combine and all the sugar has melted. Now we're also going to need to chop up 1 small yellow onion into thin slices. The reason I'm making this recipe is one of my favorite restaurants is Peach's Hot House in Brooklyn, and that's where I first tried hot chicken. And since I haven't been able to go, I decided we'd try to do this at home. Now after ½ of an hour, I've rinsed off all of the salt, and using my favorite Beck jar, I'm just adding a layer of cucumber and a layer of onion. I'm just alternating between the two. I'm packing this in as tightly as possible because it is going to wilt a little bit when we go to add the hot brine. So now we're just going to start adding in all of our nice hot sweet tangy brine. If you're more dexterous than I am, you can pour this in straight from the saucepan, but I am a bit clumsy, so I figured I would work smarter and not harder and not make a mess. So I am just going to ladle this in until it covers all of our cucumbers. And we're going to let this sit and come to room temperature, put a lid on it, and then let this sit in the fridge overnight. Now it's the next day, and I have 1 whole cut up chicken that I salted and put in the fridge for 3 hours and just let it sit in there. Why, you ask? This is not only going to season our chicken, it's going to help draw out as much moisture as possible. So I've set up a little baking sheet with some tin foil to catch any drips. I've put a baking rack over that, and I've layered it with paper towels. Now I'm taking out all of our chicken and placing it on the paper towels because we want to blot off more of that moisture. We want to ensure we get a nice crispy fried chicken, so that means we need a dry chicken. So just take a couple more paper towels and just start blotting that chicken, and I'm going to let this air dry while we start to prepare our batter ingredients. So I have 1 cup of buttermilk that we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of your favorite hot sauce to. And we're just going to mix this together until it's well combined, and we're going to set this aside while we prepare all of our dry ingredients. Now there are a lot of dry ingredients, so I'm popping up a list so that you can see what we're putting together. So to 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, we're adding 3 tablespoons of seasoned salt, 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, 2 teaspoons of cayenne. I actually use 2 tablespoons because I like a really spicy chicken. 1 tablespoon of smoked paprika, ½ of a teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, and 2 teaspoons of freshly ground black pepper. The reason I have 2 teaspoons of cayenne up there is because not everyone has the heat tolerance level of the next person, so adjust to your taste. Now I'm just popping all of those into a paper bag. I've layered it 3 times because I don't want anything to fall out once we start shaking the chicken in this, and just shaking all the dry ingredients together to combine them. Now to batter our chicken, we're just dropping a couple pieces into our flour, giving this a quick little shake. Then we're going to dip this into our buttermilk. While you're doing this, remember to keep 1 hand for dry ingredients, 1 hand for wet. I didn't. When I first started, I ended up with a batter glove. So just reserve 1 hand for your dry and 1 hand for your wet ingredients. Now we're going to take our chicken out of our buttermilk, letting any of the excess drip off, popping this right back into our flour. And we're going to give this a nice good shake just to ensure all of our pieces are coated in our dry ingredients. Then we're going to take this out and continue to batter the rest of our pieces. We're going to put this on a rack and let this sit for 20 minutes. And the reason we're doing this, we want this to kind of form a gluey coating, just to make sure this doesn't slip off as soon as we put it in the hot grease. If there are any feathers on your chicken, just pull those off. If they're too small to pull off, those will burn off once they hit the hot oil. So just continue to batter all of your pieces. This is where I remembered one wet ingredient hand, one dry ingredient hand. And again, we're gonna let this sit for 20 minutes to get that nice coating. We also need a spice blend that we're gonna mix with some of that hot frying oil. So again, I'm popping up a list here. So I have 1/3 cup of cayenne pepper, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, and 1.5 tablespoons of brown sugar. And we're just gonna mix this together and set this aside until we're ready to add that hot oil. This is what I mean about that coating. We want it to look almost sticky, because this is going to ensure that we get a nice crispy fried chicken. So to a cast iron pan, I've added 2.5 inches of vegetable oil, and we're gonna do this in batches because we don't want to overcrowd our pan. And we're gonna cook our chicken for 12 minutes, but we're gonna go in and flip this every 1 to 2 minutes, just to ensure the entire piece of chicken is getting nice and golden brown. We also want to preheat our oven to 275, because we're going to put this on a baking sheet in the oven once it's fully cooked. And if you have a splatter guard, use that as well. It's going to save a lot of cleanup time. So after 12 minutes, we're going to remove these pieces, put them on our baking rack, and pop these in the oven while we continue to fry the rest of our pieces. Once all of our chicken is cooked, we're going to carefully remove 1 cup of our hot oil and mix this into that spice mixture that we just brought together. And get the sides and the bottom, make sure that's really well mixed in. Now that all of our chicken pieces are cooked, we're just going to take a little pastry brush and just start brushing all of that spicy hot oil all over the top of our chicken. This is a key component in Nashville Hot Chicken. And it's not going to be greasy. This is going to soak in and just add another layer of flavor. Now to plate, place down a piece of white bread. This is going to catch all of that hot oil. Place a piece of our chicken and brush a little bit more of our spicy oil blend on top. We can't forget our bread and butter pickles. Oh, first we have to clean our plate for presentation because we want our plate to look as beautiful as possible. So I'm just grabbing a couple slices of our pickles here and using a bamboo skewer or a toothpick, whatever you have on hand, just place those right on top of your chicken and our plating is done. Now let's undo everything we just did and give this a taste. The coating is super crispy. This is a chicken breast and it has stayed beautifully moist and juicy. And that's because we salted it and let it sit in the fridge for that half an hour. It's worth the effort. Look at this beautiful piece of fried chicken. The pickles are sweet, tangy, and a perfect counterbalance to all of this spice. This is exactly the flavor I was going for. Is it as good as Peach's Hot House? I'd like to say yes, but they are professionals, but this is still a pretty good effort. But there it is, Nashville Hot Chicken. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Until next time, happy cooking. What is going on with my gloves? Safety first, kiddos.